Forgiveness is the attribute of the strong. And I think that, again, there's no accidents. It's the one I chose today. And so here we go. And I want to introduce my guest. And I'm going to look at his name because I have to read it, but I might shorten it. He gave me permission. So I want to introduce our guest tonight. His name is Vishavjit Singh. Welcome to our show.
Thank you for having me, Marilyn.
It's a pleasure to have you.
Mine too.
Thank you for being here. I'm gonna read a little. You sent me your bio, and I'm happy to read it. But I'm almost inclined to say, could you just put your bio in your own words live here tonight? Because I think I'd rather hear you say it than anybody else.
Sure. Would you like me to read it?
You can read it or put it into your own words. Share sure. about where you came from and some of what you've been through.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was born in the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., spent the first 4 years of my life there, and then traveled with my parents to their homeland, which happens to be India. And I spent the next 13 years going to primary school, 1st to 12th grade there. Went through a lot, as anybody does. Those are your main growing years. Was a very small ethnic minority, which is quite an interesting experience anywhere. But grew up in a family that was not very spiritual or religious, but we did look Sikh because my dad was from a Sikh family, my mom's from a Sikh family, so I had long hair, never cut my hair. And I used to don a turban. And so that's what I grew up with. I mean, it was quite exciting, quite fun. I spoke 3 different languages. And then in the year 1984, in the nation's capital, in India's capital, which is the city of New Delhi, India's prime minister was killed on October 31st. And then for the next 3-4 days, thousands of Sikhs were killed. And we had a mob that came to our house. And that was the first day of my life and probably the only day of my life when I thought I was going to die. And so that had a profound impact. Not that day. It took actually a long time for me to realize that that had a profound impact on me. And amazingly, life carries on. We survived, went back to school, went back to life in general. And then after high school, came back to the land of my birth, my homeland, the U.S. Started college here. Went through a lot of upheavals in personal life here too, because a lot of people don't know about Sikhs. Most people have a lot of preconceived notions about people who don turbans and have facial hair. So I had to face a lot of intolerance, a lot of ignorance from people. And then I started school in the Midwest. Then I went to out west in Santa Barbara. That's where I transferred to. And by the time all of this transpires, I mean, the first Iraq War happens, and people tell me to go back home wherever that is, and then I transferred to Santa Barbara, and I decided, okay, I've had enough. I want to get lost. I don't want to stand out. And so I cut my hair, and amazingly, I did feel like I got lost because now I did not get any attention, and that's, I guess, what I was desiring. A few years down the line, I discovered my passion to read, and I discovered Buddhism through books and fell in love with Buddhism. Then I discovered Taoism, started doing a lot of meditations. And then by the time I'm in Berkeley, doing graduate school at University of California, Berkeley, and the meditations really had a profound impact on me because my experience with meditation is you get to see yourself. You really get to see yourself from the inside. And that started a journey back, or I should say it started a journey for the first time into the faith that I was born into, which is a Sikh faith. Took 3-4 years past that point when I started doing meditation. And then a year before September the 11th, I decided I'm going to actually walk on the path of the Sikh faith.
So can I interrupt you 1 second before you go
Sure.
on? So you're here in I just want to recap a little bit. So you're here in the United States, you're born here, and then your parents take you back to India for a visit or to live there?
Actually, to live there for some time. They knew that I was born here, but they took me there at least for some time.
Okay, but it wasn't where they went back and said, we're staying indefinitely. It was, 13 years, they weren't clear what they were going to do. They were just going back.
They were going back, exactly. They were returning. They didn't know whether they were coming back, but I think they kind of knew that I would be coming back to the U.S.
So how long were they here before they actually took you back?
They were here for 5 years.
They were here for 5 years. So that's when you were born. You went back, and then you went through this awful genocide where you really were fearful for your life.
Yes.
So you really had a really difficult time. Did you have a difficult time with the kids in school too that you were in school with?
Amazingly, I did not have. This is the amazing thing about life. I mean, the 80s were kind of a very turbulent period for Sikhs in India. There was a lot of political struggles happening in the native state of Sikhs, which is the Punjab, which is a few hundred miles north of the capital. And yes, there were things that are happening on the streets, but in my school, my neighbors, my friends, life was okay. I wasn't really impacted until the assassination happens, and then suddenly you have distant neighbors, people who share the same city with you. They turned on us.
Why did they turn on you? Why were they turning on the Sikhs?
Well, because the Prime Minister was shot dead by two of our bodyguards who happened to be Sikh. They had turbans, they had beards, and so but it gets a little complicated, Marilyn. And since we have some time here, I can get into a little bit. But this was more of an orchestrated genocide. This was not an instant reaction by the people on the streets. I mean, the party that was in power decided, okay, you know what, we're gonna have a little bit of revenge of our own. So what transpired is the police, and I saw this with my own eyes, the police actually enabled people to go out and do the killings. Elected officials, members of parliament, actually were seen by people directing mobs to go ahead and get revenge. So for 3 days, you had mobs that had free reign to go and do whatever they want to do, with protection from the state, its security forces. And then after 3 days, they said, okay, we've killed 10,000 people around the nation. We've had our revenge, and let's life get back to normal. Now it took a while. I didn't go out until 2 weeks later out on the streets, and it was odd. I mean, you did see people looking at you in an odd way, sort of giving you the looks. Look, we had our revenge, and we give you a chance to live, and so here's your chance to now go do what you want to do. Mm-hmm. But our neighbors were amazing. I mean, we for the 3 nights that this genocide happened, we actually spent at our neighbor's house because we were not safe where we were.
Mm-hmm. Okay, because I mean, it's so interesting that you go back to India and it's you're different there, and from what I've read, go ahead.
Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead. I want to hear what you have to say.
Well, I think it's, for me, yes. I mean, as a Sikh, it's an interesting experience because no matter where I go, I'm somebody who stands out, and in some ways that's why we wear a turban, because it's a reminder to us as somebody who's living the Sikh faith that you have to live by certain principles. So it's a reminder to me every day when I look at myself. Hey, you know what? You have to see this guiding godly light in everybody else, including yourself. We're all created equal, but it's not easy. It's not easy to live that. I mean, it's easy to read that and to know that's what your faith demands, but it's not easy. And I know I have my challenges in life. I'm not perfect, far from it.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Yeah, but you're reminded about
yes.
Being mindful.
Absolutely. And so what is interesting is there's a flip side to it, because I wear a turban and I have a beard. When I go out, when people look at me, there are some people, when they look at me, it's their fear, it's their ignorance that manifests in how they see me. So they don't know who I am. I mean, most Americans even here today, and most people in the West, and a lot of people out even in other parts of the world, they don't know who Sikhs are. So when they see me through a lens of what they know, which can be a lot of times they don't really know. There's a lot of ignorance, there's a lot of fear, and especially since 9/11. Right. 9/11's been, it's been interesting how we have responded to it. It has brought us together in many ways, which is great. I mean, we need to learn from each other.
Wait, and yeah, go ahead.
But it also brought out that we also have a lot of fear at times in us that we project out to other people, and some people act on that fear by committing crimes or hate crimes, biased speech, all kinds of things.
Well, we have a question on the chat, but I want to get into all of this because obviously our show is about taking those freedom steps. Our show is about the power to be free is ours. And that's why I love talking about different things, because we all learn from that. We all become inspired by it. We all grow with it. Not only the person who, like yourself, who's on here sharing with us, we hope you grow, but we want to grow too with the knowledge that you can bestow upon us, and an understanding. Otherwise, there's no freedom if you're not understanding. So Chris has a question. She wants to know what the guiding principles are of the Sikh faith.
That's a very good question. Yes. So one of the very basic core principles is that we're all created equal. And I know we have that enshrined in our constitution as well, but this literally is a guiding principle, that we're all created equal, men and women, regardless of our caste, creed. And even though we have major religions, different paths, the way the Sikh faith sees Christianity or Islam or Judaism or Hinduism or Buddhism is that these are all different roads that lead to the same sort of destination. And what our goal as human beings is to follow our path to the best of our abilities. And so that's one of the core guiding principles. Now, the way Sikhs get to that destination is through sound. Sound is really critical in the Sikh faith. So our spiritual living guru happens to be what people would say it's a book, but for us, actually, it's a living guru. And the book is basically poetry, words of the 10 founders of the Sikh faith, who basically span a period of 250 years. So they talked about their own experiences as they connected to this energy that binds us all. They put it in words, sung it as poetry. And what we as Sikhs are supposed to do is we actually recite that poetry as many times a day you can. And as you recite it again and again and again, that sound is supposed to actually go in and permeate in your being and sort of open you up to things that connect us as human beings, and not even human beings, actually just about everything in this life, be it inanimate or animate, it has that little vibration energy in there. So that's kind of the practice of the Sikh faith is, you use sound and this amazing poetry to reach that destination.
Could you give us a little sampling of, is that possible? Can you just give us a chant?
The opening of this wonderful book text, our spiritual guru, is Ek Onkar Satnam Karta Purakh Nirpao Nirvair Akal Murat Ajuni Sabhang Gurprasad Jap. And what I'll quickly translate, basically it starts by saying Ek Onkar, and that there's one energy, one creation, one creator, right? It's fearless, it is timeless, it permeates beyond space. So and then it talks about its emotional being. It doesn't fear anyone. It has no enemies. So that's kind of the description of this energy that we all have inside us. And our goal is basically to realize that energy and to feel it, to live it.
Okay, that's perfect. And as Chris just added, when we share our freedom steps, as I referred to, we each, with each other, we all have a chance to try out new ideas for tackling fear. So, so thank you. Okay, so jumping a little bit ahead, and you started talking about when you went to Berkeley and then all of that stuff. Could you go back there? Because that was instrumental in your breaking free.
Absolutely. For me, doing Taoist meditations at the time really opened up. It actually was not a fun experience, to be honest with you, because people, when they think of meditation, they think, okay, you start meditating and you have this wonderful experience and you're happy, things happen. For me, actually, meditation was really turbulent. I had a lot of old memories that came out. I had strange dreams. I had people who had passed away for decades who were coming into my dreams. I had what I thought were random human beings who were coming into my dreams and talking to me. So for me, my meditations they were painful. But what happened is, as I did them over the course of months and 1 year and 2 years, that's when I started sort of seeing my own self. I kind of started realizing, okay, because usually what happens is you take yourself for granted here. You just kind of know who you are, but then when you start meditating, it's actually you kind of go into your own little silence, into your own little world, And for me, that kind of opened me up to seeing my own strengths and also my own
So
faulings.
was this prior to 9/11 or after 9/11?
This is prior to 9/11, a few
So was
years
this
before.
when you shaved your beard and you took the turban off?
Yeah, that was actually even well before. So what
Okay.
I did is, sophomore years, I decided, okay, I don't want to stand out. So that's when I said, okay, I'm going to cut my hair, take off my turban. And actually for a while, I just didn't believe in anything one would call God or faith or creation. I just, I was sort of lost. I wanted to experience life for the first time, kind of taking my own decisions because I had grown up being told what to do. Okay, you're gonna have long hair, you're gonna put a turban on, but I never lived it. I never practiced it. So for me, going to college was kind of like a little freedom, almost like a freedom birthing experience because I got to now make my own decisions, good or bad. I made mistakes and I learned from those. And then deciding to leave this faith I was born into my own decision and then coming back into it and experiencing Buddhism and Taoism was things that happened on that journey. And I look back and I say those were actually very instrumental years for me.
Okay, I want to interrupt you just a second. For our listeners out there and watchers and chatters and commenters, please feel free to give us a call anytime, 919-518-9773. If you have a question, you want to ask something, you have a statement, you've gone through something similar, you want to share, personal stories, we'd love to have you. So please do. All right, go ahead. I don't want to interrupt, but I want to invite people to call in.
Sure, absolutely. No. So yeah, I mean, so it's yeah, for me, um, giving up my faith I was born into happened first, then just a whole lot of exploration that happened mostly through books. I mean, that's another thing that really for me, if somebody were to ask me what has changed you, and I would say my love of books and basically having an open mind
Mm-hmm.
to to read other people's experiences, either imagined or real experiences.
So you have these meditations, and then you are rejecting the religion, your legacy that you come from, and you start to live like other people, and that doesn't go so well.
Well, it wasn't, I mean, I wouldn't say it was necessarily a bad experience. I mean, it was something that I see as a journey and
Right.
I had to go through it. And I would not say that it was a bad experience necessarily. Yes, I did not have faith in anything as in what one would call spiritual things, but sometimes that's okay. Sometimes you have to go through it, I feel,
Sure.
to actually experience perhaps things that are out there that you're not aware. So I think that was actually a very critical experience to go through
Mm-hmm.
where I said, okay, I'm going to make my steps and see it's like being an anthropologist. You go out, you explore things and find hopefully what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm. So, so you found at that point, once you did all of this and you kind of blended in more, what happened then? Is that when 9/11 occurred?
So yes, I mean, once after sort of my meditations, Taoism, and at the time, actually, around that time when I was in Berkeley, I was staying with my brother who was living in the San Francisco Bay Area at the time, and I happened to be living with him for about a year before I moved close to campus, and he was really into the Sikh faith, and he would have a stereo on at his house that 24 hours a day played hymns from the Sikh faith. Beautiful hymns. But for me, coming in as somebody who really wasn't very spiritual, it was a jarring experience. I did not enjoy it in the first few months. But amazingly, as time went on, I kind of fell in love with the sounds, with the music. Although I did not understand it, I fell in love with sort of the rhythm, if you may.
Mm-hmm.
And I started listening to it while I'm doing my Taoist meditation. I'm listening to these hymns. I'm borrowing his cassettes or stealing his cassettes so I can play them in my car. And that process went on for 3-4 years. And then a couple of years after my meditation, I decided, okay, I want to actually now walk on the Sikh path. Actually, I want to learn. This is something that's the sounds are connecting to me, and I want to actually experience this. So I slowly got into it, and one of the things that you do as part of being in the Sikh faith is You grow your long hair. I mean, that's something the founders did, and out of sheer respect, out of walking in the steps of these amazing human beings who have experienced this energy, if you may, I decided, okay, I'm going to have long hair. I'm going to grow my hair, which amazingly, if for those of you who have never cut your hair and actually, or never actually grown it completely, it takes about a year and a half. That's how long it took for me to grow my hair. And I know there's one question that I get asked all the time. So if you don't cut your hair, does it not keep growing forever? Which is not true. Nothing in life grows forever.
So you grow your hair and then you start to wear a turban, and then 9/11 happens.
Exactly.
After all this.
I donned a turban after 10 years, a month before 9/11. So August 2001, I donned a turban. A month later, 9/11 happens, and I was working in Westchester, which is about 15 miles north of New York City.
So,
and
then what? So 9/11 happens, and then what happens for you?
Well, for me, I still remember. I mean, I saw the first news on Yahoo news page on the morning of the 11th. And then I saw in our company's cafeteria, I saw on television what was going on. And I still remember there was a gentleman who was standing to my left, and he was looking at me, and he had tears in his eyes, but he also had rage in his eyes. He was looking at me, he was staring at me the whole time. And that made me uncomfortable because I could tell that he had a lot of anger, and he was in some ways directing that towards me. And so that was my first experience with.
How did that feel?
Pardon me?
How did that feel to you?
It took me back to 1984 because I had experienced the genocide against Sikhs in India, and I had a sense of what was going through his head, and him projecting his anger at me, his ignorance, if you may. And it was not a pleasant experience because I am looking at what's happening. Certainly, as an American, to me, it's a very sad experience. I feel I'm being victimized as an American, and then on top of that, as a Sikh American, I feel now I have fellow Americans who are looking at me and they are seeing me as quote unquote the other.
Mm-hmm.
And so that started a whole new journey for me because a few hours later, me and my brother actually worked at the same company at the time. We went to my boss and we basically told him, look, we feel this might be a difficult period, not only just for all Americans, but especially for somebody like us who wears a turban and beard. And he was very understanding. We were working for a technology company, so he said, go home, work from home for the next few days. When things get better, come on over. So that's what we did. For a couple of weeks, until we felt we were safe to go out, because what was happening is when we drove home, we had people already giving us the looks, giving me the middle finger as we headed home.
Wow.
So for 2 weeks, we basically had ourselves self-sequestered at home. My sister-in-law is the one who actually, as a woman, because she doesn't wear a turban, she was the one who would go out and do laundry or groceries and things like that.
And that's just because you have a turban.
Exactly.
Uh-huh. So,
but I understood. I mean, one thing I have to say, and my own experiences, and realizing I have ignorance too. I took it as people's ignorance. I did not see this as, okay, horrible people, why are they doing this to me? I realized there's ignorance, and we're all ignorant about things. And this was a very difficult thing. I mean, 9/11 was huge. I mean, personally, as myself, I mean, I've gone through something that was bigger than this. But for most Americans, and for most people around the planet, unless you live in war zones, 9/11 was really, it's a huge event that impacted everybody across the U.S. through families, through friends, through what you see, fellow Americans, and even beyond our borders, people were impacted. So I understood that people had frustrations, anger, anxiety, but I think it was difficult for me to deal with. Okay, so I have the same feelings, but now I also have to deal with people's anxiety, fear, and anger.
So have you? I think to myself, so were you ever really able to express yourself? I mean, you've experienced a lot of fear in your lifetime. I mean, big fear. So, do you feel that you were able to express your fear, or you had to hold it in?
I think I did not know how to express. I mean, this is one of those things that's hard. Nobody teaches you how to deal with your fear, usually. I mean, unless you have this wonderful friendship with somebody in your family or beyond. I did not have anybody, be it my parents or family or friends. So my reaction to a lot of it was kind of just sort of going in, just sort of retracting inside my own self. And trying to understand it from my own little perspective. Now, one thing I do have to say, even going through the genocide in 1984 and going through 9/11, one thing, I don't know where it comes from. For me, one thing I knew right away, I don't want to respond with anger myself. Because once you have anger, the first victim of anger is yourself. Then what you do with your anger, you might have an impact for somebody else, but the first victim of anger is yourself. So that's something I knew from a very young age, that if I respond to somebody's hatred with anger, I'm then going on the wrong path. So that's something I knew as a young boy. Maybe it's something I learned from the Sikh faith, but I knew that's something I don't want to lose. I don't lose myself to other people's hatred or ignorance.
So I want to ask you something also. So if you were to, if God forbid, if it happened today, and you were in the same situation of another type of 9/11 or whatever, forgive me for even asking, would you go home again and work from home, or would you stay at your office?
Well, you would have to assess the situation. My hope is that we have grown as a nation, as a community, post 9/11, that I would not have that same experience anymore. I think post 9/11, post Milwaukee massacre last year, more and more Americans do know who Sikhs are. And even beyond that, I would hope that we have grown as a people, that we don't take our frustrations out on somebody who in our head might might represent some faith or some community. Because we know most Americans they're freedom-loving people, if not all Americans. And my hope would be that we live in a better world, a world that's more tolerant. And I do feel, as I share this with you, I have to say this, Marilyn, because I know I've done interviews, I've done writings in the past. I don't want people to think that my view of the world is, oh my God, it's everybody thinks I am this, I am that, and we have to respond with our fears. I do genuinely feel that Americans at large are an amazingly beautiful, tolerant people. If they weren't, I would not feel at home. This is home for me. And so for me, to answer your question, I would stay at work, go home, come back to work the next day.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, I was curious about that, and there's a lot of, and today I know there's a lot of pain with Boston, and of course a lot of people go to, me included, could it be a terrorist? So with that, is this bringing up memories for you? Does this make you feel shaky in your boots? How does today feel to you?
Yeah, it was, when I first saw it on the internet, it was kind of hard to believe, because when I first saw it, it said couple of explosions, and my first response was, okay, so is this something that somebody did intentionally? Was it something that was natural, gas pipe? It's just, and I know a lot of other people thought the same thing when they first read it, and certainly the thoughts were, I hope nobody is injured or nobody dies from this. That's the first thing that goes through your mind, because it is very unfortunate, whether it's terrorism or not. The first thought I had is, I hope nobody passes away from this. And unfortunately, we know 2 people that passed away. So my thoughts and prayers for everyone in Boston and everybody else who's affected. But yeah, it does bring back some memories for me. Absolutely, it does. I know 9/11 was much bigger, but yeah, it did take me back a little bit.
Mm-hmm. So I know you're married. Is your wife a Sikh?
Yes, she is. She's Sikh, and she happens to be British. She's from the UK, and she does don the turban. Also, there's a majority of Sikh women don't wear turbans, but this comes back to the concept of equality in Sikh faith. Women choose to, if they want to wear a turban, they wear a turban too. So my wife also wears a turban. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, there's so much we can talk about with fear and all of this. And I mean, I know Boston today just brings it up for all of us. I mean, we all connect there. That's a place where we all can connect. And Chris has a good question. She's asking, do you think that if Boston is determined to be a hate crime, will that give you a new motivation for your cartoon superhero?
Yes, maybe. I mean, it's a little too early for me to even process what has happened. But yeah, let's see what happens. I mean, it's for me. I mean, this is something that I'm still processing. So who knows? Who knows? I mean, I certainly hope that certainly we find out what happened here, and we come together as a community and hope we can respond and give comfort to families that are impacted, and get stronger from here.
And that's what we do. That's what we do at times like this. We all come together, and through our tears, through our heart, through our tears, through our history. I know a lot of people are talking about 9/11 on the chat, and people that we've lost, and situations. This is where we go to, and this is how we come together and become one at times like this. So bring us now to your being a cartoonist, and it began because of what?
9/11.
9/11. So because of 9/11, you decided you needed to what?
Well, it was actually an interesting journey when 9/11 happened, and personally for me, it was a very painful experience, first and foremost, as 9/11 happened, and then, of course, what I had to go through with a lot of people directing their fear and ignorance at me. What a few weeks down the line, I really got into, as we all were, looking at news analysis and things like that. I got into looking at a lot of editorial cartoons and how editorial cartoonists across the U.S. were responding to 9/11 and things that were transpiring post 9/11. The first victim after 9/11 of hate crime wave that started, unfortunately, in our nation, the first victim happened to be a Sikh man in Arizona. He was shot dead. And there were many other incidents where Sikhs were taken out of trains or buses, getting punched and things like that. And cartoonists were responding all kinds of ways, really creative ways. And I remember there was one cartoon done by a Pulitzer Prize-winning cartoonist from the Bay Area, Mark Fiore, and he created an animated cartoon titled Find the Terrorist. That was the title of the cartoon. And what he had is a very fast-rotating image of different Americans. He had a Hispanic American, he had a Sikh American, he had a Muslim American, he had a Black American, he had a white American. And what the object for the user was to click on and find the terrorist. And basically, as you clicked on these people, you learned about them. You learned about the Hispanic guy, the Sikh guy, the Muslim guy, the Black guy, the white guy, and you learned about these people. But what happened is, the cartoonist was basically responding to the hate crime wave. So when you clicked on the white man, he happened to be somebody who had committed a hate crime against some of the other fellow Americans who he perceived as the other. And for me, that really hit me hard. I was like, wow, this is amazing. I mean, this guy sort of experiences what I experienced as a Sikh, as somebody who dons a turban and a beard, and he's able to project it in a cartoon. And so for me, it wasn't right away a connection. I mean, it hit me hard, but it took a few weeks before I decided, okay, you know what? I think these cartoon images are very powerful. Mm-hmm. To relay a message, to use humor, to use very powerful things like hate crimes and post 9/11 or 9/11, and to connect with people. So I said, okay, you know what? Nobody is creating cartoons with Sikhs, with characters that have turbans and beards as role models, as good characters. Well, I'm going to start doing that.
So I want to interrupt you a second. Number one, so I've seen a lot of people in turbans, a lot of men with turbans. They're not all Sikhs, right? Sikhs. They're not all Sikhs. I mean, there's all kinds of men wearing turbans from different sects other than Sikhs. Is that correct?
Okay, it depends where you have seen them. I would contend that majority of people you see with turbans and beards in the U.S. are Sikhs.
Okay. I'm glad you clarified that.
Yeah, because there are now, it's interesting, most Americans, and actually not even Americans, most people in the world associate the turban with the Middle East, with the Islamic faith. majority of Muslims actually do not wear turbans, and that happens to be a fact.
Okay.
If you look at the Sikh faith, which is a very young faith, 500 years old, comes from the Far East, majority of men actually do wear turbans, and it's not only priests who wear a turban. It's just about every man is supposed to wear a turban.
Okay.
And grow a beard base.
So really quick, because I really want to get into the idea of these